It's life, liberty, and the pursuit of self-reliance. An Economy of One with Gary Rathbun.
This is our country.
Good evening and welcome again to An Economy of One. I am your host, Gary Rathbun. I'm going to skip the formalities and go right into our next guest. Happy to have him. His time is very valuable. Joining me now is Ben Shapiro. He currently writes a column for Creators Syndicate. He's editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire and co-founder and former editor-in-chief of the media watchdog group Truth Revolt. Also author of several books, including Brainwashed, How Universities Indoctrinate America's Youth, Primetime Propaganda, Bullies, How the Left's Culture of Fear and Intimidation Silences America, and The People versus Barack Obama, the criminal case against the Obama administration. He's an attorney with his degree from Harvard. Ben, welcome to An Economy of One.
Hey, how are you? Good.
I was glad to get a hold of you. I read a couple articles over the last couple weeks about you being on some college campuses and really causing a stir. I guess the big one was California State University, where they kind of uninvited you temporarily, huh?
Well, the president uninvited me, and then I told him that he didn't have the power to do that, and he could basically stick it, and I was coming anyway. And then a couple of hours before we were slated to show up, he sort of backed down and said, yeah, we'll have the event, we'll make sure that there's security. And his idea of security apparently is not enough cops and allowing protesters to bar the doors, assault people who are attempting to get in. It was madness. I mean, my security folks told me it was as close to a riot as anything they'd seen. That's
absolutely incredible. I mean, it's, I have watched you a lot of your talks on YouTube. My wife and I generally watch that during dinner and pull you up from time to time. I don't see where your message really causes me much anxiety or grief. What is it about these college kids that they need counseling after they hear you and need safe zones?
Well, they've been told for a long time the only thing that matters is their feelings. So if something offends them, it's not that they are wrong to be offended or that facts don't really care about their feelings, as I'm fond of saying. It's just that something bad has happened. They have been mistreated. They've been microaggressed. Somebody has actually done damage to them. And because someone has done damage to them, they have every right to stop people from doing damage to them and hurting them. And even if the only thing that's hurt is their feelings. So, the same thing that drives these people to shut me down is what drives people to shut down speeches by Donald Trump or by Dinesh D'Souza or anybody else. I mean, I thought that there used to be a rule in this country that you don't get to use physical violence in response to words. But that rule seems to be going increasingly by the wayside, unfortunately.
Now, what and that interests me. I mean, we all went to college at one point or another, and it seemed to me like when I was in school, now this was a while ago, back in the 70s, that the college campus was kind of the place to go to express your views, to have debates and argue with your professors and argue with each other. What happened? I mean, why is the campuses changing so much to this violent reaction to free speech?
Well, I think that what happened is that the left failed. When they took over the university system, they figured, okay, well, maybe we can still have free speech for a little while, but eventually people will come around to our point of view and we'll be able to convince everyone our point of view. And then when it turned out that there's a small but vocal minority on campus, these people had to be quashed because anything that offends their feelings is thus problematic. The only value that the left really holds deep down is fairness of outcome, not fairness of opportunity, equality of outcome. And equality of outcome also includes equality of emotional outcome. So if you're feeling upset or dispossessed, if you're feeling angry about things, then that must be because somebody wronged you. It can't be because you're unjustified in those feelings. It must be because something has been done wrong, some unfairness has been done to you. And the only way to correct that unfairness is to have top-down control of everything, which is what the left eventually wants for pretty much all aspects of American life, including campuses.
Now, you've been a champion for liberty and constitutionalism. In going to these campuses, Do you see a light at the end of the tunnel, or are you gaining in support?
I think both. I'm gaining in support. By the same token, they say it always gets darkest just before it goes pitch black. So it could get worse from here. I have a feeling that this is probably only the beginning of a very dark period in American history. And I think that I wish I were more optimistic about where things are going, but I'm not a particular optimist when it comes to the exercise of free speech. I think that Ronald Reagan was right when he said in his time for choosing speech that freedom is always one generation away from extinction.
Right.
And I think that we are basically one generation away from extinction. This may be the generation. We're increasingly close to the breaking point where there's nobody left to defend these values. Because if you're not willing to defend the rights of people who you disagree with, then you're not really willing to defend rights. You're just willing to defend your own interests.
Well, and free speech, freedom of speech, by definition, means that some of it has to be offensive. I mean, if it's only something you agree with, why freedom of speech doesn't mean a whole lot,
Right.
So,
and unfortunately, that seems to be the way things are going all across the American spectrum these days.
Well, but in all fairness, Ben, you are helping create jobs for psychologists and that kind of stuff to come and counsel these poor people. So.
Settings. I mean, I'm always, I've always said I'm a job creator, and I guess that's just more way I am.
That's terrific. Well, we were out to CPAC a couple of weeks ago, and I think, and I'm going from memory, so you're going to have to forgive me a little bit, but I think the gentleman's name was Dr. Piper from Oklahoma University or something, that stood up to these what we call cry bullies and refused to create safe zones and allowed a lot more free speech on his campus. I think that he got an award or something out at CPAC for going against this grain that's happening on many campuses. And I was kind of encouraged by that maybe other presidents will have the courage. I think they called for the president of California State University to resign after you were there, didn't they?
Well, they did, but they called him to have me on campus.
Okay.
So it was precisely the opposite. So, by the way, I predicted that in my speech. I mean, when I spoke at CalState-LA, I said the revolution always eats its own. So the same president who tried to prevent me from speaking in the first place, now that I came and spoke in spite of him, these people will go after their own president and try and tear him down and suggest that he's at fault for me speaking, when in reality there's a little thing called the First Amendment that's mostly at fault for me speaking.
Now, how is this translating? We're seeing this on campuses. Read several articles about you giving speeches, at Rutgers and California State and that kind of stuff. Is this the same kind of attitude, the same kind of emotional immaturity that we're seeing on protests of some of the presidential candidates out there? Same kind of attitude?
Absolutely. The attitude that you're entitled to hurt somebody because you disagree with them is unfortunately becoming more and more common. What's upsetting to me is that it's bleeding over into certain parts of the right. To me, for most of my life, this has been exclusively a leftist thing, and now I'm beginning to fear that it's just a universal thing, but it's more living on the left than the right. It's when you see people at Trump rallies, for example, punching people because they're protesting.
Right.
That's frightening to me in the same way that it's frightening to me when people shut down a Trump rally. It's the same sort of mentality. I don't like what you're saying, therefore I get to shut you down. Thankfully, at the Trump rallies, it's significantly less common than it is for the people trying to shut down the Trump rallies, but it's a problem no matter how you slice it. What matters less to me is your political perspective. What matters more to me is you don't get to violate somebody else's rights because you disagree with their political perspective.
Right. We're speaking with Ben Shapiro. He's the editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire, and recently had some interesting experiences on college campuses around the United States. I wanted to ask you, Ben, from your experience, I mean, you're out there every day. Like I said, I've listened to a lot of your talks that end up on YouTube. Are we seeing this from we're seeing it from campus, we're seeing it from campaign. Are we seeing it from a wider view in the country? I mean, is this part of the division that has become so prominent in the last 8, 10, 12 years in this country?
I do think it is. I think that we're watching an increase in incivility is not even the correct word. Uncivilized behavior is more like it. I mean, the definition of civilization is that you don't have to look over your shoulder when you're walking down the street, and I think that's beginning to end. I think that there's the increase in the kind of unrest that we're seeing in cities and on campuses. It's going to translate over to crime rates. You've seen that rear its ugly head again after one of the lowest crime periods in American history. None of this bodes well for the future, but it's time for people of good heart and decency to stand up, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, and say that you don't have a right to violate somebody else's rights just because you don't like where they stand. Right. And until we have people on all sides of the aisle doing that universally, this isn't going to work. And it can't just be the right doing it; it's got to be the left too. I mean, I was encouraged that President Obama, who I largely despise in terms of policy, he said the other day that he thinks that these college campuses have no right to what they're doing when they're shutting down speakers. That's exactly correct. Now, if only he would extend that logic to the Black Lives Matter movement and some of the more extreme elements of his voting coalition.
Right. Back when I was in school, I forget who said it, but the phrase we had on campus was, "I may disagree with you, but I'll defend your right to say it to the death." And that's once again, I'm paraphrasing, and I don't know who said it, but times have changed. But Ben, I really appreciate your time tonight. I know your time is short, but you're doing great work, and thanks for having the courage and giving us some inspiration, I guess, to stand up to some of these bullies. And I hope we can talk to you again real soon.
Sounds great. I appreciate it. Be well.
Thanks a lot, Ben. Have a good evening. I'm Gary Rathbun. It's an Economy of One.